Give to Caesar. Notice, Jesus says, give to Caesar first. Not first and foremost, but just first. So, if that's the case, give to Caesar first. Here's something that maybe we can all agree on. Whenever the vaccine is discovered, it should be tested. It should be tested first on the various Caesars out there, all the folks who we now call politicians. Tested first on the politicians. If they survive, the vaccine is safe. If they don't, the country is safe. Jesus says, give to Caesar first. So most of us give to Caesar, maybe not first, but eventually when we are required to pay our taxes. This year, due to COVID, we got the extension until July 15th. Most people pay taxes and they render to Caesar, not necessarily for love of the empire or the emperor, but because we have a duty to do so, and because we'll get in trouble if we don't. Likewise, people take out insurance policies on houses and cars and healthcare because we're obliged to do so whether we like it or not. We obey the traffic rules even when they inconvenience us, and especially when we know that there's a camera right in sight, such as down the road at Merrick Avenue and Merrick Road. Caesar says, repair the bulging sidewalk in front of your house or face a liability lawsuit. What do? Call the cement company. So we give to Caesar his due in most matters because, well, it's easier to obey now than to pay later with a fine or a lawsuit or jail time. Caesar gets his or hers. That's the way the world is set up. But it's quite a completely different context, and obviously a completely different relationship when it comes to giving to God what belongs to God. Because in matters of divine law, in matters of God's law, there's no police force standing ready with an arrest warrant if we break God's law. No ticket arrives in the mail for our trespasses. There's no heavenly Secret Service or CIA that keeps a paper file on our indiscretions, even if Twitter and Google know all about it. If we are unkind, ungenerous, unfaithful, unforgiving, or just plain unjust, no one assigns a fair market value, fair market cost for these choices unless, of course, they overlap with Caesar's jurisdiction. So the acceptance or the rejection of God's laws carries no visible penalty and no material rewards for compliance. This is the essence of free will. So we really can do what we want and make up our own minds to serve or not to serve God, whose face appears on no earthly coin anymore. Even though in America, the name of God in whom we are supposed to trust is on every piece of currency and every coin. But the fact is, there's no external force requiring us to give God what belongs to God. It comes from within. And it's up to us to make a choice each day, each week, to render to God not just this hour on Sunday mornings, but our hearts and our souls as well. And obviously, we want to do that because we're here. And that's where today's gospel hits home. The Pharisees plotted how they might entrap Jesus, and they brought along these guys called the Herodians with them. And that's an important piece of the information because the Herodians were Jews who were loyal to Herod's Roman dynasty. And so they were deep into politics and they were deep into religion. And so they set this trap for him with a religious litmus test. They tried to get Jesus to opine about politics and faith, which is so often a D situation. damned if you do, and damned if you don't. So Jesus, knowing their malice, says, show me the coin. And then he asks, whose image is this? As if he didn't know. He makes them acknowledge the need for civil leadership first. And so they say Caesar. They mention that name, whom they hate, and they hate the whole series, the whole history of Caesars who have enslaved the people of Israel. The question about paying taxes attempted to force Jesus to choose between acting like a prophetic rebel hero or a heretical collaborator who honored the emperor. Unfortunately, for those out to trap him, Jesus didn't live in a universe defined by either-or choices. They should have remembered how his talk about fulfilling and not abolishing the law demanded deeper thinking than their ordinary debates. They offered bait, and Jesus trapped them. So when Jesus asked them to show him the coin, he let his interrogators expose themselves in the act of violating the command against holding graven images. And in fact, they were holding this graven image right in the temple itself. That's why they had the money changers outside. They had the graven image right with them. The Roman money used to pay the tax carried an image of the emperor and an inscription designated Caesar as the son of God, the son of the god Augustus. So their answer spotlighted their hypocrisy. Possessing that coin was a tacit admission that they weren't above collaborating with the Romans. And yet, in spite of this visual evidence they produced against themselves, Jesus didn't make any accusations against them. Instead, he sent them off with what Pope Francis calls the most iconic motto: repay to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and repay to God what belongs to God. So he not only succeeded in avoiding the trap of giving a definitive answer to their trick question, but he also called them to consider the deeper issues. Ultimately, he was asking, is there anything in creation that doesn't belong to God? That's his subtle point. The key word in this temple conversation is image. Whose image is this? Whose image? Whose inscription? And it goes back to Genesis. Image and likeness. Every human soul has the imago Dei, the image of God, imprinted. Give the coin back, but God gets everything else. On this Mission Sunday, Jesus reminds us that our mission is to acknowledge what and who belongs to God, every human life. You know, Jews and Christians in the Roman Empire lived with very high-stakes moral dilemmas as they tried the best they could to balance fidelity to God with survival under pagan rule. That's never changed and never will. The Romans could punish sedition with crucifixion, and fanatically scrupulous religious leaders, their hierarchy, had the authority to stone sinners. Today, people get crucified and stoned in different ways. We'll hear this argument in a different way next week again, when a lawyer tests Jesus about what is the greatest commandment. So they were trying to trip him and trap him up again. And he says, well, you know the answer. You know the answer to that question already because you claim to know the commandments. Love God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and your neighbor as yourself, wherever the neighbor is found. So he tells the hierarchy of synagogue and state that there is a hierarchy of commandments. If you love God, you will put God, you will put life, the gospel of life, and respect for all life first, in whose image we belong, no matter what Caesar says. So, yes, of course, give to Caesar everything that belongs to him first, but foremost, give to God what belongs to God.